Hi, everybody. Welcome to NewsNite for Friday, October 7th. Great to have you along this week. It has been a week of caution, fiscal caution when it comes to the city's audit. Is the city of Akron in trouble, or is it just some accounting things that need to be fixed? Business caution, caution for Vegetarian, the local restaurant run by Chrissie Hynde, shuts its doors without warning. What does that say about our local economy? And should it be caution for our state leaders as they look to expand a voucher program that would take more kids out of the public schools and send them into private ones? Those stories and more next on NewsNite. City of Akron's audit released this week, and it's very much a numbers game as a lot of people weigh in on what they really tell us when we look at the phrase $89 million. Let's get right at it. Joining us this week, Ed Esposito is here from WAKR. Great to have Steve Hoffman with us this week from the Akron Beacon Journal. And always great to welcome freelance journalist and contributor Jody Miller. It's a new phrase, financial caution. Sounds scary. Is it not? The city wants you to believe that the money is there. It's all a matter of changing accounting. Jennifer Hensel, the Republican candidate for mayor, says this is a big sign of big problems to come. Which is it?
I think this is just an accounting issue, basically. This is a new category, and Auditor Yost is an elected auditor, last time I looked. So, he gets to go to Akron and say, I found something. The mayor gets to respond, and his opponent gets to respond. At the end of the day, this story, the fizz went out of this story for me when I learned that this practice of these separate accounts, clearly too many of them, but the practice started with Roy Ray when he was finance director for the city of Akron. And of course, anyone who's followed Roy Ray's career knows that he's hardly a spendthrift, or he's been a very careful financial person for his career.
I agree with Steve. I think it's much ado about nothing in a lot of respects. I think that, number one, there is no money missing. There are no funds that have been misappropriated. And while this has been going on, this is the way the city has conducted and kept their books since back in the 1970s. There have been auditors of state, other than Mr. Yost, Mary Taylor being the last one, who didn't find the kind of fault with this that obviously Mr. Yost is finding, because this is a brand new designation. It's just now a month old, and Akron was in fact the first city that he came in and said this to. I don't know whether it's political in nature, and I say that with my tongue firmly planted in my cheek. But Akron has always, they're meeting their obligations, they're paying their bills, and to be honest with you, I think there's greater, and I agree with the city, there's greater transparency in having 400 funds rather than just 40 funds. I mean, it's far better for me if you can look at your books and you got a spreadsheet that says West Market Street construction project, X number of dollars. Pershing Boulevard construction project, X number of dollars, rather than a huge lump sum fund that just says street improvements.
In the first place, this whole thing about politics and whether or not it's political, if it had truly been political, they would have launched this little gem out there before the primary, which is when a lot of the Change Akron Now folks were screaming that it was come down, that it was like the worst news ever. Steve's absolutely right. This fiscal caution tag didn't even exist until 7 days ago. It's only a week old, and it's because they changed the law. Half this stuff is just because they're changing the way that they look at doing the books. This is no different than what every company is going through these days, thanks to Dodd-Frank, thanks to new accounting procedures. I serve on a couple of national foundation boards, and the accounting rules have changed in the way that you look and you allocate money, and that you have to look forward as to what you're going to spend versus what you're actually spending and taking it in. I think if you take a couple of deep breaths and you look at what the city's doing, it's no different than you going out and borrowing a bunch of money because you want to buy a house. And, theoretically, if you were to look at it according to these rules, anyone who has a mortgage is deeply in debt. But the fact of the matter is you're looking at it going over 30 years. But as to your point, Jody, about the transparency, I would say that would normally hold true unless you've ever filed a FOIA request against the city and asked them for the records, in which case you do get 700 banker boxes. So, this whole thing about transparency, I think it probably may have been a good idea back then. It doesn't hold with general accounting practices right now. It's more of an argument that only a politician, lawyer, or accountant could love. Right, but it's not an indication that you're horribly in debt. I mean, it's just this is the way you used to do business. This is the way you used to count your money. Now you need to do it this new way. I do think it's a healthy debate when Hensel comes out and talks about the debt, because that's a debate, quite frankly, that the Beacon Journal has had, that we've had on this program, that you've had particularly in your reporting. Is it healthy for the city to have this kind of debt? That's a healthy debate to have during a political campaign. It's exactly the debate Hensel and Plisquellic should be having right now. But you know, Change Akron Now would like to portray it as though the city is in the garbage dump, and it's not.
We should say that you mentioned Dodd-Frank is the bill put together by Chris Dodd and Barney Frank a few years ago that also is changing the banking procedures, which is leading to a lot of the complaints. Steve.
Well, in fairness to Dave Yost, I mean, I think, you know, there's transparency and there's transparency. I think the original concept with these separate funds was when you had a project, you knew exactly what was going on with that particular project. And then as time went on, you had obviously many projects, many funds. It kind of, I think Yost's concern is when you look at the total figure for all these projects, you really do need to know that at some point. I mean, you need to know sort of how far in debt you are in the aggregate, and it's harder to do with that system. So he's not saying you can't have separate funds. He's just saying most large cities in Ohio have fewer funds, and so Akron has moved to reduce the number of funds already.
From 700 to 140 as of yesterday. So, they'll probably have even more cut by the time they have to do this 60-day report.
I think the worry is whenever you use the word deficit, people are so attuned to that now because of the larger debates that are going on in Washington and Columbus that they fear somehow the city is in the hole deep and can't get out. And that, you know, I think that's just not true.
Well, South High is not Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. truly is like $1 trillion in debt. Right. We truly do owe China all the money that we're borrowing, but that's just not true for the city.
Well, exactly. Sure. And there's another thing that was brought to my attention, and that would be, don't forget, you've got local governments that have operated in a lot of cases on funds that they expected to come in, which is the situation that Akron found itself in. You know, they would start a project and they wouldn't have the money in hand because the grant hadn't been let or the surplus funds had not yet come in. But don't forget, we're now dealing with a state where our governor has filled an $8 billion budget hole, and he's done it, in my estimation, on the backs of the local governments. We've got local governments that are losing local government funds that they have always relied on to help pay and balance their budgets. We're going to lose the estate tax, which cities, villages, townships have used for a variety of projects. These are all revenue streams that these communities are going to be losing and have lost, and they're diminishing. And so would this not be wise for the state to make sure that everything is handled on a cash basis rather than, let's say, accrual basis? And I don't know if I'm using those terms correctly, but essentially it's, you know, you can't spend money unless you've got the cash in hand. Because when those funds start drying up even more, you're going to have communities that are going to be in a world of hurt because those revenue streams are drying up. And there could be potential bankruptcies and defaults of townships, of villages, and communities. And if that's the case, the state's going to look even worse than it does now.
But let's admit what this is all draws from, and it draws from people who are scared to death that the government is spending out of control. So when you talk about, you know, the difference of an accrual versus a cash-based economy, you're talking in terms of people understand that you don't spend money you don't have. When you look to what, you know, Columbus is going to have problems, but this is the flip side of getting your fiscal house in order. There's going to be pain. Everyone, Plisquellic, Kasich, Obama, everyone has talked about how this involves pain. You can't spend money you don't have. That's been the argument that people are making to the government again and again and again. The government's finally listening. This is what drives a lot of these accounting practice changes right now.
But in this case, it's not necessarily money that they don't have. It's just they don't have it in hand. They've got grants.
They don't have it, but they don't have it in hand. Jody, examine that sentence.
No. It's they've got money, they've applied for money, they've got it coming in, they just don't have it in hand. Whether it's because of the different fiscal year policies, I don't know. But it's not like it's not coming.
But how risky
run a deficit?
How risky is it then, as Yost pointed out, that the city, unlike some other cities, begins projects sometimes on the hope that money is going to come in on the back end?
It's very risky. There's a project, I don't know all of it, and I'll probably hear from the mayor's office right now. There's a project regarding the water plant and security on the water plant where they've gone ahead and let a contract that regarding security. Now, part of this is tied in with a company they bought in from Israel that's now doing business in Akron. It's an expensive contract. And they went ahead and let this, and they announced that they're doing this contract. They announced the work based on a grant that they applied for that they haven't heard yet that they're going to get.
Risky?
So,
Yeah,
is that risky?
I think the degree of risk is increasing. I think in past times, when things were a little more stable, if there was a grant program and the grant application was moving along, you could be pretty sure you were going to get it. You could go to the bond market, borrow money. These days, things are a little less stable, in part, at least in terms of federal and state money, because their budgets are crimped. So you got to be careful, make sure when that money's in the pipeline. And the idea of having every last dime in the account before you start a project is probably a bit much. I mean, you know, if you've gone to the bond market and things are moving along, if there's a grant program that's moving along, you're probably okay. But you got to be careful. I think you have to be more careful now than you used to. Because things could get held up. The financial markets are deeply troubled right now. Yeah.
I want to talk more about risk versus reward when it comes to city's finances as we move the conversation now to newsnight.net.
For more NewsNight content, including extended discussions, full interviews, and the chance to speak your mind about the issues, join us online at newsnight.net.
Again, we invite you to watch the extended edition of our broadcast on newsnight.net. We had a very spirited, continued conversation on the audit. We also have a blog about what goes on behind the scenes here at Newsnight. Hey, a big surprise to a lot of people Sunday. Chrissie Hynde puts out a note online. She's closing Vegetarian, one of the most unique restaurants in town. How surprising, because nobody had heard, really, that they were having any trouble.
You know, I think if you'd gone there to eat, it wouldn't be a surprise because it was like trying to shoot a cannon off in that place sometimes to hit somebody. And you know, I mean, and I got a lot of response from people that said, you know, we liked the food when we finally got it. You know, the fact of the matter is, if you have something people want and they feel they're getting served right, Luigi's is half a block away and they have people waiting out line. The Vegetarian, you know, great idea, maybe not so great in terms of the market. I thought it was interesting when the Beacon Journal did the story and the follow-up on all the liens against it. I mean, that's indicative of business in trouble, so, you know, it shouldn't come as any surprise.
Well, and we're dealing right now with an economy, and a lot of the things that are, the downturn in the economy is affecting the restaurant business exponentially in a lot of cases. The facts and figures are that 10% less people are going out to eat this year than did last year. So that affects the bottom line of restaurants. You've also got increased food costs, which obviously affect the bottom line of restaurants. When a restaurant has to pay their food costs so they can put the food on the table, they have to pay their employees, they've got to pay their rent, the one thing that goes first is the taxes. And they fudge on taxes. They don't pay the taxes. We saw this happen in West Akron with Yacono's restaurant. So it goes on for a period of time until finally, you know, it gets to the point where they can't operate anymore. Unfortunately, this was one of the top 5 vegetarian restaurants in the country. You know, I mean, you would think that with Chrissie Hynde's star power, you know, they would have gotten more people. I've eaten there, great food, but I have to agree with Ed. The times I have been there, there's been nobody else in the place.
I think it's a tough business. Being in the restaurant business is a tough business, and that's a little bit of a difficult location. It's just, you know, it's not.
Well, the people from Luigi's find Luigi's.
Well, right. I mean,
They're meat eaters.
Luigi's is yeah, Luigi's is iconic. And I mean, this is Akron, Ohio, after all. I mean, you know, people, when push comes to shove, you know, and you're out with the family, you're going to go for the pepperoni pizza most times, I'm afraid. The larger issue here, I think, is just to remind people, you know, the idea of redeveloping a city or a downtown is a difficult process. And, you know, it goes in fits and starts. People try things, they don't work. Some people try other things, they do work. I think the point in all of this that we have to remember is you got to keep trying. It's not a static thing. You don't plop something down in downtown and say, okay, we're done now. It's a very dynamic process, and you got to keep at it.
And it is a great location. There's no question. I mean, the restaurant itself is beautiful, spectacular views, and I mean, I think it's not going to sit empty for long.
Yeah.
So that's very good.
Maybe if they put a steakhouse there, it'll be really good. You can't forget too how tough the restaurant business. What's the failure rate on new restaurants?
It's very high.
85% within 2 years. So you do that. So hats off to her for putting money where her mouth is.
Absolutely.
And investing that in that, investing in her hometown. She's done that. Others continue to do that who have far less of a profile, aren't as famous, and somehow those stories don't get written up. But you're starting a new business. We did a story a couple of weeks ago where and talked to some people who are starting businesses now in the worst time ever. And their optimism is actually, they know the chances are high. They may fail. It doesn't matter. They still want to try it and get it done. So their passion, she exhibited her passion. It didn't work.
I know people from Cleveland who would drive down just to go to Vegetarian, who really loved it, and I know people that live within a mile who've never been there.
Unfortunately, they weren't coming in vans.
Yeah.
Or buses.
And I should be clear, in terms of location, I mean, it's a beautiful spot, don't get me wrong. It's just enough kind of
off the beaten path.
That made it, I
was
think,
it
somewhat
the fair? In other words, was it the unique fare that was offered that really was the downfall because it was just to such a limited audience, or was it the economy that just took away that as an option for people?
I think it's both, but it's clearly a niche. If you look at if you look to Jody's point about the restaurant business, some restaurants are thriving right now because they're seen as providing good value to people and to a price conscious customer audience. Others are just seen basically as being too expensive and too niche for me to spend time in right now, or I may do it once a month, where before I might consider them twice a month.
Well, and and then add to that mix, when you go and you sit down in a restaurant, you want to be served, you want to be taken care of, you want your food to arrive, you want it to arrive hot, you want it to arrive in a timely manner. So regardless of how good the food is, if you don't feel that you're getting service and value for the cost that you're spending, you're not going to go back.
Okay, we'll talk about this and other businesses as we continue our discussions here on NewsNight.
On NewsNight.net, we cover a broader range of topics than we can on the air in 27 minutes. Be part of the conversation on our Facebook page and at NewsNight.net.
Officially, it's House Bill 136. To those in public education, it's going to be the death of public schools. Jody, expanding vouchers is getting a lot of attention across the state. As the State House looks to this, would it be death to public schools to allow anybody, for the most part, to take a voucher and go to a private school?
Yes, I think it would, personally. This expands vouchers, Eric, in terrible, terrible ways. In other words, vouchers have been used in the past in this state if your student is in a failing school, academically watch, or academically, just not doing the job academically. You can, in fact, and this was primarily in Cleveland, you could get a voucher and send your child to a private or a parochial school. What the Republicans now, a Republican by the name of Matt Huffman, I believe, out of Lima, is now putting forth in House Bill 136, is that vouchers could be used for any parents earning up to $95,000 a year to send their student to any private or parochial school, or students that are already in private and parochial school. They could, in fact, apply for a voucher. And this is tax money that they would then get to send their child and pay the tuition at the private or the parochial school. If the tuition there is less than what the amount of money that they're going to get, which is not just state dollars but is local dollars, if the tuition is less, the parents get to bank that for the future. And my problem with this is the Republicans are saying this is choice. This is school choice. We have to give parents the choice to send their children where they want to send them. Well, unfortunately, public schools don't get a choice. They don't get a choice as to which students they take and which students they have to keep. They've got to educate all the kids. Whereas the private and the parochial schools, if you're a behavior problem, absolutely, behavior problem, special needs student, they don't have to take you. But now this is just, I think this is an egregious attack on public school education in the state.
Steve.
Well, the politics of this, to me, since I'm a political guy, are fascinating. I think, obviously, there's a section of the Republican base that really likes the idea of school choice and, I guess, to use Ed's term, a market-driven approach to education. The interesting thing to me is how and we'll see how Matt Huffman handles this within his caucus, because that's the only thing that matters. The Democrats are going to get steamrolled on this, whatever, is that you have suburban districts that are high-achieving districts. They're not in academic watch, so they're currently not available. They approve local taxes. A lot of these districts, 80–90% of their money is locally generated. And these tend to be Republican or Republican-leaning areas. So it's going to be interesting to see how much of that base is. You know, this is really a great idea philosophically. I like or maybe their kids already in private school, they like it, versus people who move to that suburb precisely because they like the local public school, who have supported with their tax dollars the local public school. And they're going to be facing a superintendent and a school board that's going to be telling them precisely what Jody's saying, which is, you know, that tax money that you thought was going to your local high school, guess what? It's not. It's going down the street. And I think that is going to be a very difficult point for Matt Huffman and his buddies to finesse. I think it's going to be more difficult. And he's already talked about tweaking, you know, what kind of tweaks. We'll see. But to me, it's a fascinating play within that Republican base in that suburban. Because so far, Jody's right, vouchers have been basically an urban, it's been an urban phenomenon. You know, the failing urban schools, you have the choice. This expands it. Eduardo.
A financial incentive to take your kids out of your public school and send them to private school.
Whose money is it to begin with? Where did the money start?
Well, it's the taxpayers' money.
It's their money. You're basically saying you're spending X amount of money to send your kids to school. We collect it through taxes. Now we're going to give it back to you. You decide where you want your kid to go. And that's market-based.
It's market-based when the market is even.
No. The market, being market-based, has nothing to do with being even. The market picks winners and losers. That's the market. This is a cold, hard fact.
And you know what? But the problem, Ed, is schools are not
market.
Schools, and this is a problem the Republicans seem to have. Schools are not businesses. Students are not widgets. Okay.
I don't disagree with that.
And the problem is when you have a public school system that is not held to the same standards as a private system. The private system doesn't have the same accountability, doesn't have the same assessments.
No child left behind.
Yeah, exactly. And so the public schools have to deal with all of this stuff. Now, granted, it may be taxpayer dollars, but if you want to end public education, then go for it.
Here's what parents want to know. Am I getting the bang for my buck for my kid going to this school? If I think I can get a bigger bang somewhere, I want to use my money to send my kid to that school. That's what is driving this. Now, to Steve's point, what will likely scuttle this is when Revere and Hudson parents start going ballistic because they have to pay more money because they're going to be losing money. Because this is not now about Cleveland that has no voice in this because, quite frankly, everyone thinks the schools in Cleveland suck and don't want to send their kids there. Why do people live in West Park? Look at the parochial enrollment there. It's not the same as it is here in Akron, where you're seeing a decline in enrollment that's primarily driven by population
But do you create a greater
shifts.
divide because now the private schools have an even larger customer base? They can be even more selective, and as Jody says, they don't have to take everybody.
But does that result in a flood of students? The fact of the matter, Hoban can still only take so many students.
Right.
St. V can only still take so many students. CVCA can only take so many students. They're going to be saying no to people if they do now.
This is like the open enrollment idea that you hear every once in a while. Sometimes you hear from Republicans usually, we ought to just have total open enrollment, public and private, all income free. You know, you can go to send your kid to any school anywhere. Well, the practical
that'd be fine if the state paid.
Let me tell you, the practical matter, as Ed is alluding to, maybe everybody in Summit County would like to send their child to Hudson High School or something like that, Revere. The practical matter is there's not enough space, and I think the same way it's going to be with the private and parochial schools. There are only so many slots. So part of this is a play to your base. I mean, there's a part of the Republican base. Their kids are already in private and parochial schools. This is a way to sound like you're helping them. The practical matter is that it's going to erode as I go back to these suburban districts. You know, this is not what the local taxpayer in Hudson, Copley, Fairlawn, some of these other high-performing school districts, this is not what they voted for. They voted for funds for their school district. They didn't vote for funds so somebody could peel their kid off and send them to Western Reserve Academy. I don't think.
Jody, go ahead.
Well, and I absolutely agree completely with Steve. But what gets me about this whole Republicans want, you should have choice. Parents should have a choice. It's the hypocrisy that I'm seeing. Because, and again, I'm going to go off on a tangent here, guys.
We only get 2 minutes, so make it a good one.
Leave me a minute, will you?
When Republicans talk about we need to give parents a choice, we are the party of choice. The only choice they don't want to give is women the choice in terms of reproductive rights. So the hypocrisy here drives me friggin' bananas.
The hypocrisy that drives me crazy is when Democrats talking about giving choice, but they won't give parents the choice to use their own money to send the kids where they'll get a better education.
Do you think every parent should just have a debit card with their tax and they just go to whichever school district?
Do you believe in a market-based economy? I'm not necessarily. I actually agree with Jody on the fact of standards for schools. The standards for private and public should be equal.
Exactly.
And the first standard that should be equal is pass the freaking test at the end of the year that says whether or not you get a diploma, and hold them to the same standards on that, and then let them work out and do this.
Well, as a regionalism guy, I'm going to throw this in. This is an invitation to enormous administrative duplication of effort, because the more little different entities you have providing education, the more superintendents, principals, whatever.
Buses.
Yeah, I mean, and it just, you know, you get to a point where this gets to be very expensive. This is why we have public utilities that are regulated, because we can't have 5 utilities in one city. You know, at some point you have some economies of scale here that are really some serious money.
Before you know
Strong
it,
public schools mean strong communities, in my
before you know it, they're
estimation.
going to want to teach people in log cabins. That'd just be awful.
By candlelight.
Be great for TV news footage, wouldn't it? Jody, Steve, Ed, thanks for being with us. Great discussion this week. Great to have you with us this week. Again, you can watch the extended edition or rewatch this entire broadcast over at newsnight.net, and also look in on our blog to see what's going on behind the scenes. Next week, more great discussion. We hope you'll join us every Friday night right here for Newsnight. Good night.